To the game-changing work channel with Roxana and myself, Veronica, and special guest, Nathalie, or we can go by Nat. And
Either one is good.
She is a communication coach, and this is a great topic. As we were talking offline, all of us deal with this some way or another in our lives, either professionally or personally. Now, this topic is related to work because a lot of us now are bringing a lot of some of our even personal things that are happening that could even impact what we do at work, right? Our emotions are heightened. So I think this is all related, which we know is the preface of our show. So welcome, Nat. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this show. And we're all about changing from fear to fearless. I just love that title. You came up with that title. I was like, oh, rock on. And how to effectively communicate. And let's talk about is why you chose this topic. Because I said, what do you want to talk about?
I think the idea, and I'm preparing some live streams right now to do in the next 10 days or so. And one thing that came up and I was challenged on was, how do I relate corporate experiences to my entrepreneur experiences? And those moments in jobs in that corporate world, in the tourism, the sales, in that world that I worked in. And I had to stand up for what I believed in or stand up for what I felt wasn't right.
Yeah.
And often as entrepreneurs, when it's a new area you're navigating, you tend to recoil back to that fear of, oh, I won't say anything because I don't want to upset the client. I want the client, so I'm not going to, I might keep my price low because I don't want the client to say no. I want to collaborate, but I don't want to give too much. So there's all of these things that creep back up when you become your own, your sole business owner, that you don't necessarily, that you may forget, or maybe you didn't even have when you were in that corporate world. So I think those experiences really have helped me build a more solid foundation in giving feedback and having hard conversations with people. And it doesn't mean that it's not hard for me. It doesn't mean that I don't, I enjoy it, but they have to happen.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And those of you that are watching us live right now, if you have any comments or feedback while we talk about the subject, we're all about engaging. So please go into the comments and add anything. So hello to those of you that are watching us right now. And can we start with maybe a little bit of how you got started? Like, how did you get to where you are today? Because your story is quite fascinating when you talk about what you learned from our conversations before.
Yeah. And it stems from a time, everything is aligning very, very well this week. This is my second podcast or, interview conversation I'm having. And it really started at a point where I went on holidays in the Dominican Republic. And when we arrived in the Dominican, there was 2 of us, and we landed back in Canada. There was 3 of us, and 9 months later, well, I had this darling package. And I knew at that moment that life was never going to be the same. And this idea of rat racing and running around and daycare and the bus work, that was not for me. I was what I coined myself as a mature mom. I was 41 when I had my daughter. So I wanted a more grounded lifestyle. And through conversation with a former client, she said, why aren't you just doing your own thing? And Kasha is the first thing I said to myself, who starts her own business? This doesn't happen. And I did some digging, and she coached me a little bit. And I realized that this is an area in my life that is easy. And how can I make it easier for others, especially women? So women are the people that show up on my doorstep. They're the ones who seek help as the experts in their field. And my goal is just to bring that ease to the conversations, to the presentations, and anything that has to do with communicating.
I love it. And you worked for the cruise line, and a lot of that started
gosh.
you know, being able to effectively communicate with all the different groups of people and getting them rallied, right?
So many, in another lifetime, I worked with Royal Caribbean International. At any one time, 64 nationalities on board. I worked with the kids program first and then moved over to the crew members. So I was essentially the cruise director for the crew and ended up really having to learn a lot about body language because even though I didn't understand what they were saying, I knew they were talking about me. It's amazing what your facial expressions and your eyes will say.
Yeah.
And I just listened for my name. There would be, whatever language, and I'd hear Nathalie, and I'm like, oh, there they go. They're talking about me. So that too, and on any type of ship or organization, as we know, there's the top down, and the chain of command on a ship is there's nothing like it. You don't go above anybody at any time, and speaking up is okay, but not. It's probably a little more frowned upon. I was in a position that I had access to all the top people, the hotel director, the captain, the staff captain, because I worked with the crew. So I had to have access to those people. So I was able to share information with them and I learned. And I have to say that was a time in my life too that, as we talked off camera about, I had a lot of emotion. I was very emotional for my crew members, for what they went through, what they deserved. Because I saw through conversations with them the hardships they lived.
Yeah.
So I spoke up for them. And I remember once being told, oh, Nathalie, you're too passionate. You're too passionate. And I thought, okay, so I'm too passionate for what I love? I don't understand. So that was a really, really scarring experience because I was reported to my HR manager about it. And she said, you have to remove yourself from the situation. This was all because I was speaking up on behalf of members. So those experiences and, dealing with a lot of different people shape you.
Yeah.
And when you take, you go back to that regular corporate world. So when I reintegrated into the corporate world in Montreal, that baggage comes with you and you learn how to apply it. Those current situations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think a lot of people resonate too with that, even if you didn't have the chance to, or you didn't work in a very super hierarchical organization. But even if you think about corporations, the hierarchy is there, the rules, the procedures, and all of the politics are there. And so speaking up is not necessarily on the menu, on the daily menu. Maybe it is once a month or during some team building activities, but it's not on the regular lunchtime menu. So I think a lot of people resonate with that. And I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that you work with women, a lot of women come to you. And that's very interesting, I think, because, well, as a standard, we know that women are labeled as better communicators than men.
Yes.
And still they're the ones who look for help in communicating. And I guess it's in communicating in speaking up more.
But the idea too, clients who've come to me also have either been asked to present on a topic that they're the experts in, and now they have to get organized and put the thoughts together and see the process and then in the delivery, and how can they create impact? How can they connect with the audience? And those are pieces that we probably don't focus on as much because we're so focused on the material, and the delivery kind of gets put to the side. So there is a gentle balance that you have to find between those two. And that's the fun part. I love doing that because intuitively I just see what's possible and then help them get to that possibility and get them to see that they too can deliver like the Oprah or the Tony Robbins or whoever they want to emulate, whoever they want to be. But it's really about being themselves.
Yeah, and you've helped with TEDx, and you've been
yeah.
a TEDx speaker, Roxana, so you can see on each of those ends of what that experience likes. Oh, just wanted to say, hey, Jenny, if you're still there watching us on LinkedIn platform, just wanted to give a shout out. But it's so fascinating when we learn about people's backgrounds and see how they got to where they are today. And you're pointing out some really powerful things, Roxana, too, when it comes to why women probably go to you, Nat, and the different reasons of why they go. It's not just one. And the topic today of becoming from fear to fearless, it's not just women a lot of men are probably experiencing this too, right? They maybe not admit it as much, right? But this is such a powerful topic of being able to, and I put this in, when I was promoting it about integrity. And the reason why I put integrity is because we want to be able to say what we mean and also feel that we're keeping our integrity of who we are at the same time. We shouldn't have to lose ourselves, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it reminds me of a time just before I went on maternity leave. I was working in the tourism industry. And when I was hired for that position, I was hired as a coordinator position. So I was coordinating events. Please note that I did not say sales. I just said coordinating. When I was hired, we negotiated salary, which was fine, which is completely normal. I was offered less than I was making at the other job. So I said, why would I leave? So they offered me what I wanted and said, in 3 months, if everything works out, we're going to give you a raise. And I thought, good stuff. I knew they were going to be happy, so I wasn't worried about that. 3 months goes by. We sit down and have the, evaluation. I get the raise. And the very next day, these pink slips start landing on my desk. And I didn't know why. So finally, one of the sales managers says to me, oh, didn't you know you're now taking care of the sales of this part of the industry? And I was like, actually. He goes, you didn't know?
Thanks for the news flash.
Nobody's told me. Do you know this went on for weeks? Now, it's not that I couldn't do the job. I could do the job very well, but it's not what I was hired to do. So when I confronted the director of sales on all this, he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, I was not hired to do sales. I'm pretty sure the general manager, who I'm going to use the word old school, he'd been in the industry for many, many years. He believed women should wear pencil skirts and heels, which I didn't do. And I don't think they were expecting me to say anything. They just thought I was going to go with the flow.
Oh, they don't know you.
And I said, that is not the conversation we had. I've never had this conversation. If you want to have the conversation, I'm happy to oblige. And then we can talk about more money. Well, since they didn't want to give me more money, and then I circumstances arise. I got pregnant. I became pregnant. So I finished, that part of the year, went on my maternity leave. And when I came back, they had somebody doing that sales job. They still wanted to give it back to me. Again, I closed the doors of the office and I said, respectfully, I'm not sure. And I won't lie, there was probably a little emotion in it because now I'm mad. Now I've been nice about it. Now I'm mad. I've told you, this is not why I was hired. Anyways, it all calmed down after that. The girl who was doing it kept the sales and the coordinating and gave me the coordinating of that area. And it all sort of, it evened out. But I'm sure that what they thought was going to happen was, we'll just give this to her. That'll be it. What they didn't know is that they hired a woman in her 40s who now is like, no, I know what I want. I took this job because this is what I wanted. I didn't want more.
Good for you. And
so there is always a way of saying it. And it's about finding that way. And,
Yeah.
these obviously, that's kind of a different kind of coaching, but ultimately the message needs to get across.
Mm-hmm.
I love how you brought up, I had to check my emotions, because we were talking about before we got on, especially with what I do, there's a lot of dynamics maybe with the people that you're working with, dynamics with the client.
Yeah.
We have to learn how to check our emotions. I mean, I think I do a lot of breathing exercises all throughout the day, because at the end of the day, it's like when we go on show, lights on, okay, check it, Veronica. And sometimes it's all throughout the day, and you got to find those moments to check yourself in the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think this is important when we talk about fear to fearless. You have to have that ability to balance that, and then be able to have the confidence to say what you want to say at the same time.
It's courage, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what it boils down to, is having the courage to step into that identity and say, yes, I want this. No, I don't want this. This works for me. This doesn't work for me. And I don't think that I had that in the beginning of my career. So, I wasn't shown how to do that. But with time, wisdom, you learn what you want and what you don't want. And at the end of the day, and though I love this job, my clients were happy with me, my colleagues loved me. When I left, it wasn't I who left. I was asked to leave because the volume of work was not there to support my role. I never disliked the job. However, I didn't appreciate the way it was kind of done. And I won't lie, it was a boys' club. It was a boys' club.
Yeah.
So
and I'm sure, I had a conversation. Sorry to interrupt you, because
Yeah, no.
I want to make it a point that I've had conversations where it was the opposite. They were in a girls' club, and it was a male, and they were
Okay.
going through this. Either way, it happens to people, right? It could be a personality difference or not. And this is why this story transcends to matter who you are and whatever situation, because it's more about,
Absolutely.
does this situation resonate with you in some capacity of what you're sharing right now? You are not the only one, right?
Yeah, and I think we see this
Absolutely.
a lot in all sorts of organizations where people rely on the fact that you're going to be afraid. That's what
Yeah.
that's basically the assumption that they're making, right? Oh, they're going to be afraid to discuss it. They're not going to bring it up because they're going to be afraid not to lose the job, right?
Or being judged.
That's a main, or being
Oh,
judged,
yeah.
or not be part of the group anymore, not being accepted anymore, and stuff like
The
that. So it's
difficult
like
one.
the difficult one, and you don't want to be the difficult one typically. So they're kind of counting on that, and that's the fear-based approach, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, there's been different situations that I found myself in where the fear is imposed, which creates fear. And it's a cycle that
Yeah.
goes around and
Yeah.
around. And I've had conversations with business owners where they say, what do I do? How do I say it? And sometimes it's just one little sentence that you need, one little thing that will help, get you over that thing. And I think on my website, I say, I'm ready to jump over the fence with you. Like, are you ready? Like, I want to jump from the fence with you and hold your hand and say, be your cheerleader, that you can do this. It is possible. And when I started uh, my entrepreneur, journey, I'll always remember it was September 2015, and on LinkedIn, having a conversation with a business coach, and she said, "Do you want to hop on a call and get to know one another?" Now, please remember what I said carefully. Get to know one another. We get on the call, and she starts asking me all these questions, but very probing, personal, like, where are you going? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And the more she spoke, the more uncomfortable I felt.
Mhm.
And then I started doubting myself. What am I doing? And all this fear started sitting in my chest. I said to her, I think I'm going to get off the call now because I don't feel comfortable. I feel like, that it just didn't feel good. She does this follow-up email the next day. Thanks so much on that. And I replied back and said, I'm so glad that you wrote to me. I really appreciated our conversation yesterday. You made me think about a lot of things. What I do know is that I didn't appreciate being business shamed. So I coined that term because
business shamed. I got to repeat
Yeah,
that
that's
one.
a good one. That's a good one.
And then she replied back saying, oh, I didn't realize that that's how you felt. I was talking to my coach to see, because, that was it, is that I had told her that I invested in money already in getting launching my business, that I didn't have any other money. And she basically told me, well, if you don't do something, like you're going to go nowhere. And she's like, oh, I spoke to my business coach and I was trying to see how I could help you and it could be free. And I thought, no. That's not how women support women, A, and B, don't shame me for being in business for I don't know, less than 3 months and not necessarily, having all the answers. 2 months later, I went to a networking event and she stands up and she's there. And when she saw me, she avoided me like the plague. But she knew she was wrong.
Yeah. And you know what? I probably, when I think about situations, especially as an agile coach, and I'm going to take that to heart, the story, because how many times do we business shame, right? In that sense of asking, hey, why aren't you doing this or that? Because we're already kind of future thinking, but not thinking about if that's creating that shame. I love that. And I'm actually going to take that to heart. Now, Danny Thompson made a comment. I'm just going to read that out. If you guys seen that, is even if you have some fear, do it afraid. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Do it nervous. You may end up showing yourself how incredible you really are. You don't want to wake up one day in a hospital bed and wondering, if it's possible you decided to find a bit of course. Now, I love that, Danny, because it's regret.
Yeah.
Regret. Once time passes, you can't take it back. I always say time is an asset. And so you have that moment to do something.
And every time I've spoken up, it's been, I think Danny's pointed very well. I've done it in fear or in afraid, because you're stepping into this, that sort of thing that, you step and you don't know if the stone is going to catch you. It's kind of that feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm going to say it and what's going to happen. Yeah. And it happens in our personal lives. It happens in our professional lives. And we have a rule in my house that if, there's something on our mind, it's, there's a question we'll say, I want to share something, but I'm not sure. And that's the door that opens up that says, okay, I can share it. Now that I've said that, I can share it. So, I think it's being able to, what is Kelly's saying, to be vulnerable 1,000%.
Yeah.
Because we're not taught, but in a corporate world, you're not taught to be vulnerable. That's much different. Much different.
We're not taught, and we're not
allowed.
Not allowed. And it's not a practice, right?
No.
I mean, because and the minute that you do it, you're going to be the odd one out. Yeah. And you don't want to be the odd one out. It is. And we talk about the vulnerability in the workplace a lot. But the moment we see it, do we really support it? Or do we judge it?
Oh, and how many of you have ever been in this situation? I have to describe it, right? That one person either speaks up, isn't afraid, or someone provides vulnerability, both situations, and it just gets quiet.
Yeah. See?
And it's this weird sense that nobody says anything.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And someone, and I, being a coach, you feel compelled to want to fill that space because you're okay, we got to move on. This is probably not making that one individual feel brave right now, and they need some support. And gosh, I wish I'm not the only one saying it. I wish it was a leader. like stepping up and doing that.
But silence
Can I
says a
say
lot, though.
something?
Yes,
Yes.
it does.
One thing, but in also I work with managers and leaders of teams, right? And some of them tell me, I do this, and I tell them, this is what I'm going through. This is what my week has been looking like. I feel, and they start to be vulnerable, right, in front of their teams, and they get that silence, and they say, okay, why am I getting it? Why is no one else sharing it? And I ask them, how long have you been doing that for? Because that's going to take a while for people to understand that they can react and they can start sharing, and to form a new habit of how we communicate as a team. That's going to take a while. It's not going to happen the first time that you do it. Everybody will be, oh, let me tell you about me.
and another thing is, which is probably important, and I'm sure you'll say this, Nat and Roxana, is, are you responding to reactively, or are you responding to really actually understand? Because any situation, if I'm showing vulnerability or if I'm actually being brave to point something out, the natural reaction with some people is to just reactively respond to it versus trying to understand it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the listening piece, right?
Yeah.
In communication is I often ask this question too, if I do a group training or if I do work with teens, I'll ask them, what is the biggest piece that you need to know about communicating? And they always come up with great answers, but ultimately, are you a good listener? Are you really giving your audience, whoever they are, one person, two people, 10, 15, 20 people, are you giving them that listening ear so that they can get their response that they deserve?
Yeah, that's powerful. And as we are diving into, kind of circling back of saying what you mean, let's share some nuggets with everyone watching. What are some Nat nuggets that we can give about helping them when it comes to communicating? Some tips, as I say, about sharing what you really mean. Like, what are some things that will help people move in that direction?
So I think when it comes to sharing what you really mean, and every situation is unique, so you have to sort of adapt this to what will work for you. Take the emotion out. We talked about this before we got on air. Try and stay factual, because if you're emotional, the other person will also be emotional. Also depends on who you're dealing with, right? There's so many factors that you have to analyze when you look at this, but I think it really does boil down to facts are facts. So Did I say this or did I say this? I said this and this is what I meant. There's no sad, mad, happy, none of that. It's just, this is what it is. I asked you to do this. Was that not clear? I think asking for clarification is another piece that we're afraid to do. I'm in my 40s now. I don't have time to wonder. In your 20s, you don't ask for help because you don't want people to think you don't know what you're talking about. In my 40s, I'm like, screw that. I don't know if I can say that on LinkedIn, but screw that. I'm like, point me in the right direction. Just tell me where to go. Tell me what it is you want, because I don't have time to waste. So in a job, if you're not sure, just ask. Ask for clarification. When I coach people and I coach them on answering questions effectively, one of my key nuggets, and I don't like to give this one away very much, but I will give it away here.
Oh, special nugget. Alert.
Just ask them, can you repeat the question?
Woo.
It's so silly. I mean, really, it is silly. But if you ask me a question and I don't know the answer right away, it's amazing what you can come up with in like 4 or 5 seconds. So Roxana, can you just repeat the question? I want to make sure I understood. So you repeat the question. Meanwhile, I have given myself this time lapse.
I love it.
And I'm going to give it credit to my Toastmaster days when, we did practice in table comments and things. And that was one of their tricks. But I've kind of repurposed it when I coach on, answering questions, like whether it be interviews or audience questions, if you're doing a talk, ask the person to clarify. It gives you time. And then it kind of takes that pressure away, because ultimately, and we don't realize this, is that we are on 24/7. And last week in my coaching calls, we were talking about the Amazon experience where people, push a button and they want it now. So they want answers now. People will wait for your answers.
Yeah.
So take your time. Just take your time.
Oh, I think this is important. People will wait for your answers because there is a misconception out there in corporate world, especially when I experienced that you're with these executive directors and they want an answer, but that pause is very different than I want a clear, succinct answer. There's a difference. And so if you need that pause time and to be able to give that direct, succinct answer to the individual, that has nothing to do with, I need an answer, right? We kind of garble the time versus the output of it, right? You mentioned another thing offline, which I think is important too, is getting clear on the outcome. And probably we should maybe bundle, what do you think, intent too, because you can get clarity by making sure the outcome and the intent, right? Because a lot of people will say something and it's, we say things in different ways, but the intent could be the same, right? Like I have conversations, like my mother-in-law was visiting and she says things very differently in the way that I say it. And I always have to get clarification of what her intent was. Because when I'm like listening to her just straight, I'm like, I don't think she means this. Have you guys ever done with that? Like, well, wait a minute. I don't want to answer. And I always have to get clarification because just the way she approaches something is very different than I normally, my brain works. And that can be any different than anybody deals with out there in the world, right? My mother-in-law situation, even my mother, right? It's not just her. It's just the way they communicate. I don't know if it's a generation thing or I don't know what, but it was very different, right? Like, I'm like, I don't think she meant that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And wanting the clarification is something that we're not taught either. You're given directions by management, your boss, colleagues, and you go with it. And if you don't understand it, and I remember doing this, in my 20s or my 30s, sort of like, oh, I'll figure it out. But eventually, I don't want to just figure it out. I just want to do the work.
Yeah.
So why not start really at the source? Be clear on what you need to deliver so you can have it. And I think, when it comes to, like, for example, Roxana, if you've done TED, right? You have to have that outcome at the end of what is it you want the audience to, remember? What is that point? Yeah. What is the thing, the topic that you want them to you want to capitalize on? And the speakers I worked with last summer were actually two men, both completely different. One had a speech already finished, done, and needed delivery work, whereas the other one had nothing. He had an idea. Oh boy, that one was tough. So we had to weed out all this stuff. And the question kept like, what is the outcome? What is it you want them to remember? What do you want them to, until we were able to get it. And this applies across the board. I have a definition for audience and presentation. We present every day. Whether it be a one-to-one conversation, this conversation between the three of us, or 100 people, you are still presenting. And the audience is the same way. Your audience may be 100 people, maybe 10, maybe 1. But you have to treat them equally, but you have to adapt what their needs are.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So if we were to go back, so let me see what my brain's probably not going to remember right now, all our little nuggets. So I'm going to go from close to, so we talked about outcomes. We talked about pausing, getting clarification.
Yeah.
And what was that first one? Asking,
ask for clarification and then asking for the question to be repeated.
There we go.
And also, and listening, right? Because that's where we started from.
Yeah, I should. And that's me not writing it down, trying to memorize right now. And I'm going to
Don't pretend.
I'm going to claim the age doesn't remember as well anymore.
But actually,
Yeah.
summarizing is such an important part of
that's
real
why
listening, right?
But you know what? Repeating back
Yeah.
is actually a good way to remember. Now,
Yeah.
fear to fearless. Some of the things
Yes.
that we all talked about. It's practicing all these things that we're mentioning to give you the confidence so you can shift from being fearful to fearless. And it's just starting.
Absolutely.
Just starting to listen better, just starting to ask clarifying questions, just starting to take a minute before you respond. All these things.
And know that it's all okay.
Yeah, even if you fumble.
And it's all okay, even if you fumble. We all know at the end of the day, somebody's going to judge us, somebody's going to criticize it. They're out there, and you can't change that. But guess what? That doesn't belong to you. That belongs to them.
I love it.
Exactly.
I love that. And that's a great way to like seal that, because it's funny because I put it in there about being judging, because you have to be okay. You're always going to be judged. It's a thing you just have to accept. If you're trying to fight that, you're basically trying to fight water flowing.
Yeah.
Right?
And you have to choose you. You have to choose you. And that's where the fearless comes in. It's like, I'm going to do this, even if it scares the crap out of me, I'm going to do it anyways. Yeah. And I have this post, I haven't put it up in a while, but it basically says that being nervous and being excited is this very same thing. So why not choose being excited?
Yeah, that's so true.
So be excited about, it sounds silly, but be excited about asking for that clarification.
Yeah, I love it.
Be excited about, what you need to deliver or what you need to share. Today I did my first reels on Instagram. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but I did it anyways. And I felt a bit silly doing it, and I felt a bit silly captioning it after, but I was just like laughing at myself hysterically because I thought, it is what it is. I know I'm good at what I do. This is just like one little piece, and I used a Taylor Swift song, and I just had fun with it. And I think that's what it boils down to. If you're prepping for some big presentation, yes, you have to be strategic, and yes, you have outcomes, and yes, you need to pause, and you have to do all those what I call puzzle pieces of speaking. But then have fun, because if you're delivering something that you're passionate and excited about, that's what they're gonna vibe with.
We should always think of
notice
fun,
other stuff.
And that's one of the things that I'm glad that we're trying to shift out of that in corporate world about the word fun. Like, it doesn't exist in there. Like, that's what I'm going to say, is because when you introduce that, it relieves the pressure and stress, which we know when we're in those stressors, our brains don't function. The creativity's not there. Everything gets all messed up. And so when you start thinking of a situation being fun, to your point, you already start in a great place by just taking that mindset and trying to make it a fun one, no matter what you're doing.
Because this topic of public speaking presentations, I mean, there's different percentages out there, but there's, people, they prefer to die than to present or talk or even just do what we're doing now, right? Like, people would rather crawl under a rock. And when I do like little surveys, in a group situation, like how many of you, right now would come up here and embrace the stage? Like, I get 2 hands. And then how many of you just would crawl under the tables and, most of the hands will go up. Well, that's okay, because I was that person. And now I want to show you how to have fun with it. How it can be fun.
It's so awesome. Communication, me being an next school teacher, I'm very passionate about. I really don't see a difference between education and corporation world, because it's just your path and journey in life. Is that, and I loved what you were doing, when you were in Canada. I hope you still continue helping the younger generation really find their voice. So that's a great thing that you were doing, because it's so important that what if everyone learned this while they were younger, and what would be different for them personally and professionally? Well, what if?
Listen, if I could save one teenager from the heartache I felt as a teen, I've done my job. And part of what saved me was that I worked with kids, or I have been working with kids and youth for 30 years. And kids, when they're young, they just don't care. They just want to be entertained. They just want to be led. They want to have fun. So you can kind of get down to their level and do that and not be judged, because they don't.
Yeah, it's a great like palette to start at, right?
100%. So when I go into high schools or parents hire me to work with their kids, I really try and dive a little bit into what will work for that team. I mean, there is a process and there are all, some structural stuff that you have to take care of, but what's going to work for them? What is their end game that they need to get to, and how can we get there and make it easy? And that's sort of my philosophy. How can we make this easy and fun?
Love it.
And yes, I promise to continue on.
I think that's such an important topic. And as we segue to what we want to say next, it really comes in so nicely together, because it's all about knowing what makes you. We talked about not being nervous, but being excited. What makes you excited? Knowing more about yourself and understanding how you work best and how you make your best impact, which is when I'm going to bring up
oh boy,
the GC index assessment, because that's where, and that's one tool, right? There are so many tools out there that help us understand more of ourselves, of our personalities, of how we work and what makes us tick, so that we know what our strengths are, what our points that we need to develop are, and so on. So this is one of them, and it's the game-changing index assessment, which measures how we make an impact in our work and life. And I love to look at these. And actually, you have your own profile, Nathalie. Veronica and I have the same profile. It's identical, which doesn't happen too often.
And since this is outcome driven, and realizing you had outcomes when you were younger, and now you have outcomes in your business, and regardless of what you worked on yourself and your mindset, you've come a long way, as we talked about before the show, is that your highest inclination of where you want to put your energy to impact. So like, think of your outcomes. You're a polisher playmaker, which makes sense, because even back in the day at Royal Caribbean, you were all about the people and you wanted to make an impact and make good outcomes for them. So your energy was always derived around that. And that really helped you probably in that role. And so as you probably had a lot of time, more from our conversation offline to kind of think about this, how does that align like with what you do today now, knowing that where your energies are?
Well, it definitely, as a speaking coach, communications coach, my end goal is always to help that person achieve their goal. So the polisher comes in, and I always want it to be, I hate to use the word perfect, but there's some sense of perfection, but it's what I want for them.
Excellence.
Obviously they wanted too. And I know that it can help me and it can hinder me, because if the client is not as committed, that sort of bumps me out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole other conversation, right? That doesn't belong to me. But I recognize in myself that when I show up, I'm showing up with all the tools to help you step into that higher identity or in that speaker role. But when it comes to the playmaker, that whole sort of the gathering, right? Is, I think of myself in those group settings and really bringing everybody together on showing them how they can be better communicators, whether it be between within a small group or, amongst individuals.
Yeah, and it makes
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense, because just kind of repeating what you were talking about, even with the younger generation, I want to make sure that I understand what they need. And you repeat a lot of that when you shared a lot of your experiences, which it's a combination of excellence, making sure they have a good experience, which is driven a lot
Yes.
from that polisher, but your true nature to care about people, it's like a winning combination in what you do in truth. And when you look at like your other, like with the game changer, that's why you're so open to creatively think of different approaches, and you're not so linear in the way that you approach everything. It's
Well,
very
there's a
interesting.
need, there's a need for adaptability, right? So when you work with students, you have to adapt. I mean, I remember one class I showed up in, and it was a Friday last period. Ask me if what I planned really got done. It did not. But on like literally the flip of a switch, I created this new game that I implemented into the program on that Friday. And when I introduced it to the teacher the next week, she's like, "Oh, when did you come up with this?" I'm like, "Oh, you don't want to know." Like, it was just out in left field. And so, it's that sense of being adaptable to and it's same thing with a client, right? If they show up, they have, I have designed the plan that this is what we're going to do today, and they show up and they're somewhere else, they're in a different space, they have to work on something else. Okay, well, let's switch it up. And we put this
And
aside. We'll do this another day. Let's focus on this today. You have to be able to do that, because that's part of it. Let's go back to the listening.
Yeah.
Exactly, to the listening. And also what I see a lot of playmakers do as well is, and you said it as well, emotions are important. So let's recognize those emotions and what they are.
Mhm.
And so we adapt to what we can do, considering what we have right here, right now, because that's what's going to make implementation possible, right? So I think for a playmaker, that makes a lot of sense. And I see a lot of them do that because they care a lot about how people feel in the process. It's not just about the process and the result. And it's, for you, the combination of playmaker polisher is even more interesting, because to me, this tells me that you're able to balance that need for perfection and excellence with what's possible for people in this context right now, in their situation right now.
And if we look
And
at Roxana and I, just to kind of put the context of the
Yeah,
variances,
I
we are
know.
completely driven by our game changer. So playmaker will take a back seat.
yeah,
That is what we're driven by.
Yeah. It's very, and what one of the things Veronica and I talked about offline as well is recognizing who your clients are. And for me, as speakers or as the audience, because if you know who's in the audience, you can better gauge how to communicate with them. And I use a different assessment to do that. But even this assessment, if you showed me different ones, I probably would be able to gauge my presentation specifically, or target, because then I would tap into who they are. And that piece, let's be honest, ladies, we've all been to talks, we've all been somewhere where you sit there and you think, oh my gosh, I want to die right now, because like this person, like, I don't get it. I don't understand what they're talking about. The topic may be very interesting, but
yeah,
so you have to learn, if you're going to present a lot and often, how do you connect with your audience? And if it's, you need to learn how to gauge an audience, you need an assessment like this one or a different one. Use the tools. Because you will only benefit at the end of the day. You will only benefit.
Yeah.
I agree. That's what the tools are for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And every tool has a different purpose.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and where I've done a lot of them to kind of understand is like my personal branding. I did the Sally Hedgehog one, and I was marked as a catalyst, which kind of made sense where I'm very passionate and wanting, to talk about my innovated. But because of the game changer, that helps me kind of say, okay, if I'm more passionate about my ideas, but now I need to learn the skill set to articulate my ideas better, to your point, where communication will help to enhance that, because I'm never going to want to put my energy if it's not driven by this game changer. That's just a fact. But I need to learn how to enhance my skills around it. And that is where, if I communicate, I will put my energy different if I was like an implementer or something different.
Yeah.
My baby's that game changer. And all of that needs to be centered around how to effectively communicate of what lights me up when it comes to change. Because I'm all about challenging the status quo. Imagine that. I mean, that's why we created this show. But it's going to fall flat, which it has in my life, right? Because I'm always thinking 10 steps ahead and others are just not there yet. I have to learn how to help get them there. And it's all about communication. And it's something I'm constantly improving and learning how to do better.
And I would challenge you on every step of the way to say, what do you mean? What does that mean? Because if I don't understand it, for sure somebody else is not going to understand it.
And for sure, I live with that all the time, because I've kindly realized with this game changer what drives it, because it's like, why does Veronica do what she does, right? But it's really of saying, okay, I'm never going to act like an implementer. I'm never going to be the strategist type of talker, right? Which you might get certain people, and that's okay. I deal with that. But how do I enhance that baby? Because that is where it lights me up. That's what I'm passionate about. And that's what you're going to get the best out of me. And all the tools are going to help accentuate that. And now the journey that I'm in right now, I personally, and I'm just sharing this, and Roxana, you might have your different story, is I actually know what I need to focus on now in a way that is right for me. And you mentioned you, right? So when we talk about fear to fearless and saying what you mean, it's all about you. And so the more clarity that you understand about who you are, and I encourage all of you to go through that process, and it's not a one and done, by the way, it's a journey. You will be able to get there. It starts within, folks. It starts within.
Absolutely. Because when we know more, we do, what is it? When we know more, we can do better. We know, I just forgot to say.
I had another quote in mind from Alice in Wonderland when she asks the Cheshire Cat, which way should I go? And the cat asks her, where do you want to go? And she says, I don't know. Then it doesn't matter which way you're going. And I think it's exactly that. Knowing where you're going, that's going to help you in communicating and choosing the path. That's the right path to communicating what you want to communicate.
Yeah, because great if you're an awesome communicator, but you don't know who you are. You still got a piece missing there in the puzzle.
Yeah.
But the best are the ones who think they're great communicators, but not so much.
That's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other show for another day. But I'm just throwing it out there. And I've been asked many times, how do I tell this person that? And I've actually, there are different ways of sharing the information, but the person also, I think, Veronica, I don't know if it's with you, I share this, self-awareness is a big piece. That's a whole other show. Being self-aware of what is going on in your life and maybe where you need help is a catalyst. So
it's the first step, and it doesn't mean you get it right. Like, I'm so self-aware of the things I need to work on, and I'm still working on them every day. But at least I know they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, speaking of what's going on with you? So we have
with you, Nat.
What I do. What am I doing?
So master your authentic voice. Tell us about it.
So what do you want to know?
Well, what do you want us to know?
So really, my goal when I created this brand, it came from a place of authenticity, of having people feel good about what they have to say, that it can be done with ease and fun. I didn't know at the time that I would have a color and a logo. And if you go visit the website at nataliematt.com, you'll see that there's a specific logo. And that logo represents the throat chakra. And the throat chakra is all about self-expression, speaking. And this all like happened in my car at a red light in the downtown of Montreal. And I love telling that story because it just connects.
Yeah.
I feel like there's this connection with the blue, the chakra, the self-expression. And people don't know that. People who know will know, and those who don't, I share with them. And I want people to feel excited about what they have to share, because every one of us has value. Everyone has a story. And when you're in business and you're excited about your product or your service, you should be able to stand in front of a group of people and feel empowered to say, here I am, this is what I do, this is how I help people. And I take you there. I will take you from shaking in your boots to doing the wonderful focus. That's really what's going on.
So if everyone goes to www.Nathalie, is it Mailhot? Mailhot?
No, Mailhot.
Is it such a American thing, like to butcher
It
your
would
last
be,
name?
yeah.
Yes,
It
I
would
know.
be, but it's okay. It's okay.
Forgive me. Now,
It's okay.
go to the website, www.look at it down there, please. That's me getting around it. And get a hold of Nathalie. She's on LinkedIn, so you can always go to her profile too to connect a message with her. So she obviously has a lot of great things to help a lot of you to find your authentic voice.
Yes.
So please don't hesitate to get a hold of Nat.
Ladies, this has been incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
No, thank you. And as always, Roxana, you have your league for legacy.
I do. Yes. It's we have a new session starting this Friday, so we're going a new monthly cycle of weekly meetings. So ask me about it. It's your global online program for management and leadership development. We meet for group coaching, and you have online training on a lot of topics, including how to listen and how to motivate and how to engage yourself and your team. So that is what we do on a regular basis, because it's all about the practice. So I'm happy to talk to you about it. And we also have our Game Changing Work newsletter, which Veronica put together.
Yep. So we send that out. And so if you want to subscribe and get the newsletter, right now we're using my domain, but eventually once I get my act together, we'll have the Game Changing Work domain. But anyways, it is a newsletter that I send out, so you always know what's going on. And we'll have a fun card of Nathalie's GCI on there as well. So anyways, lots of good things to come that we always share on the show. We're all about changing the future of work, bringing personal and professional together, which is all about human and purpose, and making sure that everyone is happy at work. And truly what I mean that is we're doing the things that we love, and we're helping companies thrive in the process.
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, look what we have for next week. Gaslighting your job, 7 signs your workplace is abusive. So how about personal and professional conversations?
Yeah, I thought that was a saucy one to bring up. So
I think so too.
So hopefully you guys will meet us next week on that topic. And if any of you guys have any suggested topics, don't ever hesitate to drop it on any Roxana or myself. Message us on LinkedIn or emails. We're always open to some topics for the Game Changing Work Show.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Nat. And you have to come back.
Nat.
Because we love all the stories you have to tell and the conversations. Love it.
It was fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.